Water is one of the best types in the game, with a solid offensive profile and even better defensive one. Some great Pokemon like Kyogre and Urshifu Rapid are Water type, and so many Pokemon that aren't quite happy with their type run Terra Water to make themselves harder to break through. But not every Pokemon that is Water type is guaranteed to be great, and in this video I'm going to go over the 10 worst Water types in Scarlet and Violet VGC. Real quick, I would very much appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, and use YouTube's new feature to hype the video. It really helps out small creators like myself a ton. To clarify, the Pokemon I'm going over must be fully evolved, and they must have been VGC legal at some point during Scarlet and Violet, so Pokemon that aren't in the game or are mythicals will not appear on this list. At our number 10 slot, we have Lantern. Lantern has the benefit of a unique typing and two really good abilities in Volt Absorb and Water Absorb. It also has Bolt Beam coverage with Stab Scald and room for Protect or Electroweb depending on what you want to run. These are some great qualities, so what exactly makes it bad? Well, its stats are just terrible. Aside from HP, which is pretty good, especially for the time it came out, everything else is abysmal. You can have all the Bolt Beam coverage you like, but you're not getting anything done with base 76 special attack and base 67 speed. Bulky Gyarados can survive Thunderbolt from this thing, and even your friends that aren't that into Pokemon know Gyarados is super weak to Electric. It sucks because I actually really like this Pokemon's design, but it was cursed to be a mid-low stat mon from Johto. At number 9, we have Samurott. Base Samurott is very bad, and it pains me to say it because this was the Pokemon that I first picked 14 years ago when Black and White came out in the States. Samurott somehow managed to get the Hoenn Special in Generation 5 with decent physical and special attack, but having all its other stats suffer for it. If Game Freak made a choice to either make it a special attacker or a physical attacker, it might have had the stats to take more hits or outspeed something, but now we have a Pokemon that doesn't do anything particularly well. The only reason it isn't lower on the list is because it has higher BST than most mons here and access to good moves like Sacred Sword and Aqua Jet. That being said, Samurott needs the ROM hack treatment to become viable, with a secondary fighting typing to get Stab on Sacred Sword, stat optimization, and sharpness. Hisuian Samurott actually fixed a ton of these problems with base Samurott, making it faster, giving it a secondary offensive type, and letting it do damage with sharpness, but even with all of those buffs, it's still a mid Pokemon, which really frames just how bad of a Pokemon Samurott is because it doesn't have any of those benefits. Moving on to number 8, Floatzel is actually surprisingly close to being a decent Pokemon. As a result of its decent stat distribution, it has pretty good attack and speed, and its move pool has Wave Crash as well as Ice, Dark, and Fighting coverage. It has Swift Swim to boost its speed in the rain or Water Veil to prevent burns, which is actually very important for a physical attacker. The issue is that its stats are just under what they need to be usable. It's a little too slow to compete with some staple Pokemon, a little too weak to pick up key KOs, and much too frail to withstand attacks from Pokemon that either outspeed it or survive its initial attack. With maybe 40 more base stat total, this thing could actually be an okay rain attacker, but unfortunately loses the number game compared to other Pokemon. In our number 7 slot, we have our only ice type on the list, Dewgong. Dewgong falls into the trap of most early gen ice types, with its priority being in its bulk rather than its offense. I talked about this concept in my video about good Pokemon with bad types, which you should totally watch after this one, where good ice types should be built to be fast and offensive, because the type is poor defensively, but good offensively. In the case of Dewgong, it isn't even that bulky. 90, 80, 95 bulk isn't bad for a Pokemon that has any other usable stat, but Dewgong just doesn't. The main problem isn't even special attack, it's speed. Dewgong wants to be a supportive Pokemon, and it actually has some good support tools like Fake Out, Icy Wind, and Encore, but with base 70 speed, your opponent has already gotten the chance to do something before you have, probably with both of their Pokemon. And at that point, Dewgong's help is going to be too little too late. Dewgong isn't further down the list because it does have that decent supportive moveset, mostly carried by Fake Out, but it will not be enough to make it even close to a good Pokemon. In our number 6 slot, we have Lumineon. Lumineon has a few decent things going for it. Storm Drain and Swift Swim are both great abilities, and its supporting move pool isn't actually that bad, with access to Tailwind, Icy Wind, Encore, Tickle, and Charm. That's about where everything good I have to say about this Pokemon ends. I could mention it has a surprising amount of flying and fairy moves, but none of these are hitting that hard coming off of base 69 attacking stats and no stab. Its supporting kit is also far less impressive once you factor in its terrible bulk and only decent speed. This Pokemon is part of a genre of unoptimized stats that really make it so nothing is awful, but nothing's good enough to be usable. The main problem with this genre of stats is that they exert so little pressure that your opponent can afford to only focus on the partner Pokemon, while you need to try to cover two good Pokemon with Lumineon and whatever poor soul ends up next to it. In 4th and 5th place, we have two Pokemon that are so similar I'm going to talk about them together, Swanna and Cramorant. If I do explain why Cramorant and Swanna are bad quickly, I'd ask you to imagine Pelipper without Rain or Wide Guard and with lower special attack and physical bulk. The main advantage they have over other water types is that their flying typing gives them access to Stab Brave Bird, Stab Hurricane, and Tailwind, and means they don't get OHKO'd by Rillaboom if they run Bolt. Swanna's abilities are Keen Eye, Hydration, and Big Pets, all of which are basically useless, and Cramorant's ability requires it to use Surf, which doesn't do that much damage and hurts its partner, or Dive, which is a 2-turn attack that is very easily blocked by Protect. If they didn't have Tailwind, they would be even further down the list, because at least with Tailwind they can hopefully support whichever Pokemon comes in after Archaludon hits them for 400%. For that reason, Swanna ranks just a little bit better than Cramorant because it is faster, making it a little more likely to get Tailwind up, but aside from that, they're very similarly bad. Before I unveil the top 3 worst water types, I want to go over some Pokemon that I briefly considered but cut for one reason or another. Crawdaunt has bad bulk and speed, but its access to Adaptability, Crabhammer, and Knockoff kept it off the list. It simply does too much damage to be here. Veluza and Clawitzer are pretty similar to most of the mid-low BST Pokemon, but their access to Sharpness or Mega Launcher and their surprisingly decent move pools kept them safe. They also have the benefit of being part of later generations, which gives them better stat optimization. Feraligatr has bad speed, and not enough bulk to make up for it, but it made it off the list because of access to Sheer Force and Dragon Dance, which actually can be effective if you get the opportunity to set it up. Lastly, Basculin Red Stripe and Blue Stripe are technically fully evolved, but it felt cheap to put them on the list because there is an evolved form in Basculegion. They just can't evolve. It felt like if I were to say the worst bug type was a male Combee because it can't evolve, but they're not even as bad as the worst Pokemon on this list. So let's get into our bottom 3. Gastrodon was one of the best water types before Scarlet and Violet. In Sword and Shield, this mon was absolutely cooking. It had good matchups into strong water types, Yawn for Dynamax Pokemon, Scald, Icy Wind, basically anything it could want. In Scarlet and Violet, it has unfortunately fallen off, not seeing the success in low and high power formats that it once did. Whiscash dares to ask, what if Gastrodon never had a peak to fall from? Yeah, this section was never about Gastrodon. I love that Pokemon, and it's good enough to where it will never be on a list of worst water types. It's not even bad, it's just mid or off meta right now. Whiscash, however, is Gastrodon with worse stats and useless abilities. It loses to Rillaboom worse than anything on this list, which on a list full of water types is saying something, has poor bulk, does no damage, and basically has just Icy Wind to offer for support. I could see this thing getting better if it gets an evolution in Gen 10 or 11, or maybe some new abilities, but as of now, it is nothing and shall remain that way. In our second worst place, we have a Pokemon that might seem a little surprising, Palkia. In a vacuum, Palkia clears every single Pokemon on this list, and it's not even really close. It's a legendary Pokemon with legendary stats. It has 200 more BST than most other Pokemon on this list, but we're talking about VGC, which means Palkia isn't competing with Lumineon or Lantern, it's competing with Kyogre and Koraidon. Even though it has 200 more BST than most other Pokemon on this list, it's worse because it costs more than the others do. If you use Floatzel, you might miss out on Palafin, but if you use Palkia, you'll miss out on Miraidon, Zamazenta, Lunala, or any of the other busted restricteds out there. Palkia is lacking in damage and reliability compared to other restricteds. Neither Spatial Rend nor Hydro Pump have the damage some of the other restricteds do once you consider their boosting moves like Hadron Engine, As One, or Drought. Neither of these moves are 100 accuracy, and in the case of Hydro Pump, you're definitely gambling on hitting or not. If you use Palkia, there's going to be a game where you need to hit a crucial Hydro Pump and you just don't. Palkia does have access to Trick Room, which is good for it to have, but it's not slow enough to take advantage of it like Kali Ice is. Palkia does have an Origin form, which is slightly better because it's slightly faster. If I were to rank them individually, Palkia Origin would probably be 3rd or 4th on this list, but it didn't feel right to dedicate 2 slots to Palkia because they're similar enough. Even with all those things going against it, Palkia isn't our worst Pokemon here. No, that dishonor goes to Wugtrio. Some of you might have seen this coming. Wugtrio is the most pitiful water type of all time. It has only good speed and decent attack going for it. Its defensive stats are so bad that it can go down to Fake Out. And that's not even an exaggeration. If it gets outsped by anything, it will be going down unless you give it a Sash. But if you give it Sash, it can't run Life Orb or Choice Band, which means it's not doing much damage because its strongest move is Triple Dive, not even Wave Crash. Gooey might be one of the worst abilities to put on this Pokemon. Whenever a Pokemon with Gooey is hit by a contact move, the attacking Pokemon has its speed drop by 1 stage. An ability that activates on contact on a Pokemon with 35 HP and 50 defense might activate once or twice per battle if you're lucky, But at that point, you put Wugtrio in place of a good Pokemon and had it faint just to get a speed drop on something else. At least Dugtrio has Arena Trap, which allows you to lock down the game state and use it to your advantage. Wugtrio doesn't even pressure anything, and because of its stats, everything pressures it. It ends up doing maybe 60% to a water-weak Pokemon and then getting annihilated in return. Wugtrio is strangely terrible for a Pokemon released in Generation 9, because most Pokemon, even if they're not great, have something to redeem them, but Wugtrio just has nothing, making it the worst water type of Scarlet and Violet. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hype the video, because as I said, those really help out small creators like myself. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like my video where I talk about how a bad Pokemon won the World Championships. Regardless, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in your future games, and have a good one.